Hello, and welcome to our review of Onyx Storm. Normally I dress up for these things, and so I decided maybe I'd like to be a shadow daddy. But then I realized that those are extremely overdone, so I decided I am your shadow auntie. Oh, hello, darling. Do you need anyone killed? Do you need a casserole? No one can defeat Shadow Auntie in battle. Don't you worry about it, babe. Don't worry, I'm not gonna do this accent the entire review, although that would be hilarious. Shadow Auntie also forgot that she was wearing her earbud, because Shadow Auntie likes to listen to books while she works around the house, making those tater tot casseroles. Nothing adds flavor like a little bit of shadow powers and mayonnaise. Alright, the earring is in place, and I am done doing that accent, even though I was having an amazing time. I'm gonna try to get through this as fast as possible, but we will see because I have a lot of notes. Now, if you would like a recap, a last time on, I'm not doing that because I cannot be arsed. All you need to know is there is a girl named Violet who goes to a hyper-violent dragon school, and she got 2 dragons because she's very special. Alright, if you want to know more than that, if you want to know the details, you're gonna have to go and watch my reviews or someone else's reviews of the previous 2 books, or heck, read the previous 2 books yourself. Good news, this book doesn't care either if you don't remember what happened in the last book, because not only does it launch right in to the next happenings, but it does not believe in recaps. A lot of times books will understand that it's maybe been a little while since you read the previous book, and maybe you don't have time for a 500-page book to recap before you get onto this over 500-page book. Those books will throw in little details like, when character A did this, it was because of this thing from the previous book that you might not remember. This book's not interested in that. You remember, you sink or swim. So this is my way of saying that there might be stuff that I forget from the previous books and scold this book for, but it's not actually scold-worthy. I think there's plenty of scold-worthy stuff in here, but if there's something that I'm just forgetting from a previous book, that's why. I'm not gonna go back and look through all of that just to have hopes of understanding this, and I really wish that the author would not treat it as though everybody's just going to be binging these things back to back, because they are monsters. The length is atrocious. Tell me why I had this book and a Stephen King book on reserve on Libby at the same time, and this book is longer. When your book is longer than a Stephen King book, maybe rethink. Maybe rethink. Unless this book really needs to be this long, and spoilers, no. There are theories that Rebecca Yarros is being paid by the word, and I am suspicious that this might be true. By the way, I have some tea here, so if you see my lipstick disappear, and it's because I'm sipping on my tea. I should do all of my intros like that now. Anyway, hi, if you're new here. I don't know how you wandered in on this video, but this is the sort of nonsense that I get up to, really. So the very first book in this series, I did what I call a read-along for, where we really went in-depth bit by bit and dissected the book. And then the second book, I just did a long form review like this, where I listened to the audiobook and I took notes, and then I'm just gonna literally go through my notes that are right over here and just talk about them. That's it. That's the review. So if you're looking for something deeper, maybe this isn't it. But if you want to have a good time and maybe learn a few things along the way, this might be the review for you, friends. And if you are new here, I have great news. I have a ton more reviews on my channel, so if you like this one, there's probably going to be more for you to love.
So before I launch into talking about the book itself, I wanted to talk about seemingly an ongoing issue that this series has been having with printing and distribution. So we heard when Iron Flame came out that there were all kinds of printing issues. There were upside down pages. Some people got the maps were wrong. The sprayed edges were bleeding. The end pages were missing. All kinds of weird issues like that. And then with this release, I have been hearing about a special edition for Target that a bunch of people ordered, that a bunch of people wanted, and I think it just wasn't distributed enough, enough copies weren't made or shipped or something like that. So people were getting their orders canceled. People were showing up at Target and not able to get the book that they either ordered or were hoping to find. It is bonkers. And also, again, just me and my general hatred of special editions. I know a lot of people love them and you're free to love them. But anyway, that's not what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about this struggle that these books seem to be having, these big popular books seem to be having lately. with getting the books out, and they already feel so rushed. The production is super, super rushed. A book a year, especially a book of this length, that is an astounding turnaround rate. To have it written and published in a year is ridiculous as far as like the speed of publishing goes. So it's no wonder that there's issues cropping up. And like, I think it's okay if we slow down. I think that is okay. And we have to remember that books take time. Writing books and publishing books is one of the most time-consuming forms of art. I think people just need to be more chill about waiting. But this is definitely giving me flashbacks to when I was younger and there would be these big Harry Potter things where people would go to midnight releases and all of that stuff. And they weren't even there for special editions most of the time. They were just there for the new book. Or it's the same thing was happening with Twilight, and then especially the Twilight movies. For me, personally, a great sign that a book is completely mediocre is for everybody to be losing their minds over it and going to like midnight releases and such. I know, I'm petty.
So, the first thing that caught me off guard was the dedication at the beginning, and I just went and re-listened to it. And I'm not going to word for word it, but it's something like, for all of like the outsiders and the people who never felt like they belonged and the people who aren't in the mainstream. And I just practically guffawed. I was at work listening to this and I laughed aloud. Luckily, I was not anywhere where there were people, because like this, aside from having two disabled characters, there's two now, this is the most mainstream, unchallenging book. There's like nothing in this book. Like there's queerness if you squint. There's nothing challenging in this book at all. This book is so mainstream, and that sentiment is such a pick-me girl sentiment. Anyway, that opening aside, this book just dove headfirst right back into basically where we left off. We just had the big battle at the end of the previous book where Violet's mom heroically died in an act of please like me so I can die for the pathos, because the mom was awful, 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 and then it turned out that all the awful things she did were totally to protect her daughter all along, and then she died. The way that she thought she was going to protect her daughter is idiotic, but I guess she gets all the credit in the world for that. Violet 1000% just forgives her mother everything. In this book, her mother is a saint, because her mom like died at the end of the previous book. So all of a sudden Violet's like, oh my God, I love my mom. She's the best. Also, the other main thing that happened at the end of the previous book is, Jack Barlow was resurrected, which is very silly. And then Xaden turned out to be a Venin, which are the evil wizards who don't draw their power from dragons like the good people. They draw their power from the earth, and that makes them bad. Mostly because apparently if you draw your power from the earth too much, you just turn evil. You just turn evil. That is unexplained. Like, I can see drawing your power from the earth too much, destroying the earth, destroying the life there. But there are ways around that, as we find even within this book. So we just have to have that other caveat of the more you use your power, the more evil you just become. You just become evil. Don't ask any more questions about it, please. So Xaden is now a Venin. He did that to save Violet in a very, very tenuous scene where he actually didn't need to do that at all. But now he's a Venin. But if he's very, very good and doesn't drink any more earth energy, he won't turn evil. So right now he looks normal and he's like resisting. And luckily, Xaden now being a Venin is super, super easy to hide. Good, wouldn't like to have any kind of difficulty for our characters, and you will find that is a theme throughout this book.
Super easy, barely an inconvenience. Oh, really?
So yes, Violet is very upset because her mom sacrificed her life, but she is even more upset about poor baby Xaden. The poor mom is dead, but like Xaden has sacrificed so much more. This is, if any of these books were Xaden simping, this one is the simpiest. Like, this book is about Xaden, not Violet. It is all about just how Xaden is not only the most amazing man ever and the most handsome man ever, but also poor baby. Just always just like feel so bad for Xaden. Guys, will you please feel bad for him? He's having a really hard time, okay? You remember Jack, of course. Xaden begins the book by pestering Jack, who is immediately like, join me. And then Jack is like gone for most of the rest of the book. In fact, like he's got like one more scene and that's it. So I'm so glad that we resurrected this character from the fucking dead so he could have like 2 scenes in this book and not matter for the rest of it. Why did we have to resurrect a character from the dead? Because that adds so many complications to this world that the author is not interested in exploring. Like, conveniently, I think in the last book we killed off the healer that raised him from the dead, so we never have to be like, well, why don't we raise anybody else from the dead? Why don't we raise Violet's mom from the dead? Can't do it. The guy who raised him from the dead isn't around anymore, so I guess we're shit out of luck. We raised one guy, and he was super fucking evil.
Is it supposed to be stupid?
We also find out that Andarna is not the last of her kind after all. It seemed heavily implied to me that Andarna was the last of her kind. That's the baby dragon, Andarna. And now everyone is treating it like it is super obvious that she's not, and we just have to go find her people. Her dragon family's totally out there, and that's completely obvious. Is it? The book is treating it like it is. The book is treating it like this is knowledge that we already had going into this book, and I don't feel like it is. By the way, if I mispronounce any of the names, I'm going to mostly try like not to say names in general to avoid mispronouncing them, but this is just a reminder that the author Rebecca Yarros used a bunch of Scottish Gaelic names and didn't bother to learn how to pronounce them or show any kind of respect to them or the language in any way. So that's not great. Yeah, they're still mispronounced in this book. Even though she knows now that she did that, nobody like went to the producers of this book and were like, okay, we need to start pronouncing these correctly. They're just doubling down on the mispronunciations. So Xaden has a little bitch fit and won't communicate through his bond with Violet for a minute. And Violet has nothing else in her life going on except Xaden, so she spends a lot of time just feeling very sorry for herself that Xaden won't communicate. We're walking. Now in this book, Violet occasionally remembers she's disabled. I think more than she does in the previous book, but it still only comes up when it won't actually inconvenience her. It comes up in moments where she'll just be like walking down a hall and she'll be like, oh, my joints are sore today. But if there's ever a time when she needs to not have that be an inconvenience, it won't happen. Sometimes she'll throw in a line like, oh, I'm so glad that my shoulder didn't subluxate or whatever it is. But it doesn't actually do that in the scene where it would actually be a problem for it to happen. So even though this author, I think, realized that she wasn't including Violet's disability enough, she's still not doing it well because Violet is never inconvenienced even slightly by her disability. And in my experience with people in my life who have disabilities, they are inconvenient and don't just go away at times when you need them to. I would also like to report in that I listened very closely, and I don't think we hear about the color of Imogen's hair even one time. You will recall that famously Imogen has pink hair. Ask me how I know she has pink hair. Probably because in the last 2 books, every time Imogen was on page, we mentioned her pink hair. Her hair is not mentioned, I don't think, at all in this book, and now I'm starting to worry that what if she doesn't have pink hair anymore, you guys? Don't panic though, Imogen herself is not mentioned very much in this book. There are too many characters in this book, the author cannot juggle them. So many of them just disappear for a while, show back up to say a couple of important lines, and disappear again. This author can handle about 2 characters, Xaden and Violet. Everybody else just like pops in to have an effect on Xaden and Violet's life and then goes away again. They don't get to be whole real people in their own right. Also, in the previous book, one of their teammates, I believe it was Sawyer, lost his leg in battle, and he is still sans leg now. And I'm sitting here looking at this book like, all right, so yes to resurrecting Jack from the dead, no to giving this man a leg back. Right. Right. I know we have the excuse that our best healer is no longer with us, but I'm looking at Rebecca Yarros and the book. We will go out of our way to contrive a way that we can resurrect an evil man from the dead when he was crushed under rocks. But Sawyer doesn't get his leg back, no. We have one of our first random attacks that happen. This book likes to throw random attacks at our characters when things are getting too slow. They always go roughly like this. Someone attacks, Violet kicks their ass for a while, but then gets herself into a pickle, and then Xaden shows up with all of his shadow powers and saves her. So, like, both of them get to be badass, because she does really well for a long time, but then at the very end, Xaden still gets to ride in on a wave of shadowy badassery and save the day. By the way, I hate Xaden. He is my least favorite character, and it is almost entirely because he is the least original character on the planet. He is, like, beyond cookie cutter. He is what you would get if you, like, Xeroxed every single one of these bland shadow daddies. Like, he doesn't have a single thing that is his. He is only elements of other characters. I also say that the only reason that I think Xaden is a Venin now is that so he has another reason to be shadowy and broody, and Violet has a reason to be like, I can fix him. I can see the good in him. He would never hurt me. Because after the previous 2 books, we have to have more reasons for them to, like, not just be a power couple together, even though they do spend a sizable portion of this book being a power couple together. But it's mostly just so they have another thing that can come between them, and so Violet can just simp to the max and be like, I'm here for you, Xaden, no matter what you do. She literally, several times in this book, is like, I don't care who you kill, I don't care what you destroy, I will always be here for you. And it's like, okay, I don't like it when it's the reverse of the I will burn the world for you either. I don't like it when it's the guy saying I will burn the world for you, and I don't like it when it's the girl. Just not a sentiment that vibes with me. Then they have sex in chapter 2, but oh no, Xaden accidentally uses his shadow powers when they boink. So they have to not do it as much as they want to, because then he'll use his shadow powers and turn more evil. Again, super, super contrived, just to have some reason why they don't just boink 24/7 throughout this entire book. This book would be over 500 pages of just boinking if the author didn't come up with all these reasons why they can't. So you may also recall that we were trying to make an alliance with the Griffin Riders. They were the enemy in book 1, but then we figured out that they were allies and the Venin were the real enemy by book 2, except for the Griffin Riders are useless, and spoilers will be for the rest of this book, but the Griffin Riders are coming to Basgiath, and they're making unreasonable demands, like, we don't want to go to your murder school and get killed, so promise you won't kill us if we go to your murder school. And, you know, Violet and friends are just like, oh, they're so persnickety, wow, what unreasonable things they're asking of us. I have the wards are falling, and Violet thinks of it in terms of how sad them being defeated would make Xaden. That's pretty much Violet at all times. Anything bad that's happening, she tries to think about it in terms of Xaden. Violet's siblings, Brennan and Mira, are having conflicts that feel extremely contrived this book, mostly because there has to be some kind of interpersonal conflict, so the author manufactured some. We have a brief moment where the Dragon Riders and the Griffin Riders, I'm not going to call them Flyers, I'm going to call them Griffin Riders, are at each other's throats, but that's just an excuse for another action scene, which goes exactly like all of the rest. Violet does some badassery, and then Xaden shows up to win everything. Sometimes I just gotta read you these notes. So I wrote, someone claims that violence is not how cadets behave, when it is 1000% how cadets behave in this murder school. The author, even though she tries to settle out of this book at the school, seems to have realized that the rules of this school are stupid if you actually want to have a successful army. And so they have backed way, way off of the whole, like, students are dying left, right, and center. I don't think there's like maybe 2 nameless side students that die in this entire thing, even though in the previous books, and especially book 1, it was all just non-stop. How if you put one toe out of line, you are dead, and it's for the betterment of all dragon kind or whatever. But now this is a reasonable school that actually wants to train its military to be its military instead of just find a reason to kill off young adults. Dane appears occasionally in this book, and it's mostly to get shat on as a character. I think the author thinks that she's redeeming him, but like I said, it's mostly to get shat on. So they're having a conflict, and Dane tries to resolve it. He tries to talk everybody down, but he simply cannot, and you want to know why that is? It's because he's not Xaden. Xaden shows up and talks everybody down because aside from being a badass shadow daddy and the strongest dragon rider that they have, he's also their best diplomat. So Dane doesn't get anything. He doesn't even get crumbs. Like, let him be diplomatic or something. But no, it has to be Xaden because Xaden has to be the best at everything. And literally characters on the page are saying to each other that Dane can't do it because he's not Xaden. People are like, oh, Dane's trying to do something. Somebody go get Xaden so we can get it done right. Also, you remember Kat, Xaden's ex-girlfriend from the previous book, who was there just to be a love rival so that Violet could get all territorial and sniffy. Well, in this book, she's totally had a change of heart, and she tells Violet, I see why Xaden chose you. But never fear, if you thought we were done with stupid, contrived exes, now Violet has one. It turns out that she used to totally date the prince, the older prince. Like, one of the princes secretly goes to their school. The spare goes to their school and is in hiding for most of this book. But the heir to the throne used to date Violet.
You're kidding. What a crazy random happenstance.
What? It is implied in the first book that she may have had a couple of crushes before Dane and has maybe had some sexual experience along the way, but one would think that the fact that she dated the crown prince would have come up if the author had thought of that at that time and not just retconned it into this book, because now it's Xaden's turn to be jealous. And jealous he is. He is unreasonably, irrationally jealous every time he sees this man, even though, let me make this so clear, Violet never even has the tiniest inkling. Like, if there was ever a thought of attraction towards this prince guy, it died of loneliness long ago because Violet not interested in him even slightly. In this book, Violet is Xaden's bitch and nothing else. She never even, if there's a hot guy standing in front of her, she won't even be able to see that he's hot because he's not Xaden. That is the kind of girl we are dealing with. Also, Xaden is a duke now. We had to give him a title in this book. He's a duke now. Of course, he hates it, even though he's like super good at leadership. The peace negotiations are failing for off-page reasons because stupid adults are doing them, the older people who are in charge of being wrong. So all the young people need to go and do a heist about it. And when they do that, then the negotiations can be solved. Also, something we keep forgetting about is that the wards are failing, and the only way to power them up is with another dragon like Andarna. I forget why Andarna can't just keep fueling up the ward stones. It needs to be one of her people, but not her. No idea why. If that was explained in the previous book, the author does not re-explain it in this one. But we have to go find Andarna's people, which is a plot point that feels like it should be the main point of this entire book, and is forgotten about mostly until about halfway through. Every now and then, Violet will remember to mention, oh hey, we have to find Andarna's people. And also, for some reason, we've tied finding Andarna's people into finding a cure for Xaden, because she thinks that the dragons are gonna know how to cure venenism somehow. I'll just read another of my notes to you. On one hand, I'm glad the whole book isn't Xaden and Violet angry at each other for stupid reasons. On the other hand, I'm annoyed that they don't have any brain space for anything except each other. It's like two horny teens, but somehow they also have to save the world. Literally all they think about is each other 24/7. Our main characters, as part of some heist or another, do something to the wardstone that they're not allowed to do, which I do not understand, but it makes it so that Griffin riders can now wield, and the Griffin riders are like, that's what we wanted, peace talks are back on. It doesn't matter that the Griffin riders can wield, though. That's like never important in the rest of the story. This basically exists because Violet and crew have to keep going against the rules and then never having any consequences for it. We need to know that they're rebellious.
Also, they can only be rebellious in smallish ways that fit within the dictates of the school and the world building that we have so far. They can never actually stop and go, hey, maybe the whole system is bad and we need to do something about that. It's just small things like, oh, I don't like this bad commander. This one bad commander is someone that I will go against. Or these bad adults are not good at leadership, so I will push against them. And it's only ever rebellion when it helps Violet. Like, she wants to get the peace talks going, because if that gets solved, then she can go on her quest to find a cure for her hot boyfriend and another cool dragon.
Interestingly enough, the Griffin people, they worship the same gods. Everybody in this world worships the same gods. It is unclear whether those gods are actually real, but everybody worships the same ones. Some people focus on one at a time, like some people are followers of one god specifically, but everybody worships the same pantheon. Violet gets arrested for literally 10 seconds for what she did to the Ward Stone, and then she gets released anyway. Because she's a main character. Like, at least in the previous book, they tried to, like, pretend they were slapping her on the wrist for some of the things she did, but we're not even doing that anymore. Violet gets away with everything. Violet and her team end up getting sent to the front lines for a hot minute, and that makes me wonder why they have front lines, because the way that this works is that there are wards that create a protective bubble over, like, cities and fortresses. And if a venin flies in on their wyvern, they, like, die. Like, the venin, I think, can't use their power or something, and the wyvern just drops dead. So, like, why is there a front line where they have to hold anybody back? All they have to do is, like, sit within the protective bubble. It's kind of confusing, but we have to have a front line because there's got to be somewhere dangerous for our characters to go. When they get there, they discover that a small village is under attack where the family of one of the unimportant side characters lives, and of course Violet and her team have to defy orders to go save the village and rescue at least some of the side characters' family. Violet doesn't do anything unless she's being told not to. Like, nowhere in this book does she ever actually obey a single order she is given. What a great military officer she's turning out to be. But while she's there, she finally gets to meet our baddie of the week. That turns out to be a cool venin lady with silver hair, who is super underutilized and literally is just a villain of the week. She shows up to be like, mwahaha, join me, Violet, and then buggers off repeatedly. At this point, I admitted to myself that there are some parts of this book that I don't absolutely loathe. And I can talk a little bit too how I'm finding this book versus Powerless and Skyshade, which I also read recently. If you'd like to see both of those books thoroughly dissected, you can check them out here on the channel. I have series about them. In this book, there are moments. They are few and far between, but there are moments, especially a little bit more at the beginning of the book, where Violet's just like hanging out with her team, and for a few lines she's not talking about Xaden, and they're just kind of being a group together and shooting the shit. And I actually kind of liked those scenes. They are not enough of them, and mostly Violet is talking and thinking about Xaden all the time, but in the few moments that we get to glimpse her not doing that, I didn't hate it. And that brings me to this book overall. I do want to say that I didn't hate this book as much as I hated Powerless and Skyshade. And that is because I feel that the author, Rebecca Yarros, doesn't hate her own book. I think, like, there might be parts that she didn't enjoy writing, and she definitely wrote too much book. But unlike the author of Skyshade, who feels like she has just given up, she hates her own series, she's given up, she's writing it under duress, they have her family hostage or something, Rebecca Yarros, it still read to me like she didn't hate her own book, and she still believes in this series. And like, that goes a long way to making a book enjoyable. Did it save this book? Oh, God, no. But at least I could listen to a book that didn't feel like the author hated every moment of writing it. I will say what I'm confused about is Rebecca Yarros is taking another break. Like, she finishes one of these great long tomes and she takes another break because she's like, I've been writing nonstop, I'm exhausted. And I'm like, does somebody want to tell her that she doesn't have to put so many words in? Does somebody want to tell her that books can be shorter than this? I think she should probably know that because she's written other books besides this series. Hun, you don't have to write this much. You could take more. You don't have to write just for days and weeks and months solid. Just make this book shorter. Don't write some of these scenes. But anyway, back to talking about the baddie of the week. Of course, she takes a minute or two out of her time to talk about how badass Violet is, because none of these books would survive if they did not involve praising the main character. Everybody's got to praise the main character. So the type of dragon that Andarna is called an irid, which we find out hilariously is short for iridescent, because these dragons, the names for them are just a color and a weapon, because their tail like turns into a web. There's sword tails and morning star tails and club tails and stuff like that. I'm like, again, I've made the joke before that these dragons are NFTs. They're just the same except for they're a color and a weapon, you know, just mix and match. And even the special one is just an iridescent dragon or an irid. And I'm like, do the dragons, are they aware that humans have named them in such a ridiculously simple manner? Here's something that is going to happen now and will continue throughout the book. Some Griffin riders have joined Violet and her team. The Griffin riders do not matter, and I keep wondering why they're here. In this book, for some reason, Xaden keeps a secret from Violet, and she's reasonable and fine about it. She's like, I understand why you have to keep some secrets, for the safety of your people or blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, really? Where did that come from? Because, in the previous book, she was so upset anytime Xaden had to keep anything a secret from her, and I don't think she had an arc where she learned it was okay for him to keep secrets. I think in the previous book it was supposed to be him learning that he's supposed to tell her everything. So why is she being so reasonable? In general, Violet is extremely reasonable this book because her entire personality has become simping over Xaden. And so anything that might have made her angry in previous books doesn't anymore. Because she just has to be there for Xaden. He's just having such a hard time right now. And we find out that most of Xaden's people, so the people with the relic marks, that they actually have 2 powers. There's an in-book reason for it, but I don't care. So Xaden is not unusual that he has both shadow powers and his pseudo-psychic ability to read people's intentions. They go to Pester Jack for more answers. This is his second and final scene in the book. He answers Violet's questions because then he gets to poke at her, and she's like, why are you answering my questions? They've been torturing you forever. Why are you answering my questions? And he just legitimately just says, because I like bullying you. His personality trait is still unhinged bully, and that's it. That's all he's got. And Violet's here, so he answers her questions so he can have the opportunity to bully her. At this point, I realized that the Venin are vampires. I believe someone else noticed this as well, but I came to this fully on my own and only heard that other people were realizing the similarities after I came to this realization. But they're vampires. They don't drink blood. They drink the magic from the earth, but otherwise, they get super pale. They get red eyes. They get more powerful as they age, and they become mavens and sages. And also, they have sires. As soon as a Venin is made, another older Venin is supposed to take them under their wing to train them in the ways of Veninhood. And the more blood that they drink, magic from the earth that they consume, the more vampire-y that they get. This book finally makes mention of temples to various gods, and though I think that temples may have been mentioned offhandedly in the previous books, this is the book where the gods in the temples actually start to matter. I don't know why Rebecca Yarros finally decided to actually do something with the gods that she just kind of threw into her book. In the first 2 books, it just felt like it was there because fantasy worlds are supposed to have fantasy gods. And so she threw some names out there yeah, we worship Dune, the god of, I don't remember what the fuck. And that was it. But in this book, she's decided, oh, hey, I have all these gods. Maybe I should do something with them. So we start hearing about the temples and the different gods and their followers and stuff. And then because this author cannot let go of the death grip that she has on this school, her characters just go back to classes for a while. Also, their teachers have suddenly flipped a switch, and whereas before they were keeping information from the students and filling them full of propaganda, they're not doing that anymore, and they're letting them see forbidden books and stuff like that. And I don't know why. I'm pretty sure that the same people who were in charge of the school in previous books are still in charge of the school in this book. But now, since Violet did a coup or saved the day or something, suddenly we're not doing the propaganda theme anymore. So now let's go back and talk about Sawyer, because in this hyper-violent murder school where you can just be killed for putting a toe wrong, you're having a bad day and you slip up and somebody stabs you, but we've got a guy who lost a leg. You'd think in this hyper-violent murder school, especially in book 1, if this character had lost a leg in book 1, he would have been put down like a horse. But in this book, he's just convalescing, and everybody's like, are you okay? And take all the time you need, and do you want to become a dragon rider again? Even though up until now, Violet has been the only disabled dragon rider because people with disabilities couldn't handle being dragon riders. They would be a liability. But now, not only is Violet okay with it, which obviously that makes a bit more sense. She's disabled, he's disabled now too. They would have that kinship, and I don't hate that. But the entire culture, nobody is standing in the way of this guy, becoming a one-legged dragon rider. Even though, like I said, that is shocking if you read the previous books, where their culture was built up to be so insanely violent and irrational that any sign of weakness, quote unquote, would get you killed, and rightfully so. It's good that you died because you were weak and you were weakening the rest of the dragon riders. But this guy is fine because we like him. He's Violet's friend. So we're not even going to ask, does he get to live or not? Of course he does. And he gets to take all the time he needs to decide if he wants to be back to dragon riding. Alright, so because the author decided that Xaden sometimes accidentally using his venom powers when he does it are not enough, now the barrier between Violet and Xaden having more smexy times is that Xaden is a teacher now, and teachers can't do it with students, which is ridiculous. Like, in this school of all places, we're going to make that caveat. And normally it wouldn't even matter because Violet and Xaden do whatever the heck they want anyway, but for a very, very brief portion of the book, just so that there's some conflict, and again, a reason why they're not just humping like rabbits for the entire over 500 pages, everybody who's not in Violet's friend group goes full narc. And if they see Violet and Xaden so much as make eye contact, they like scold them like they're the religious grandmas. Like, no relationships for you anymore. This is the one rule we really, really care about. Also, Violet was the only one who seemed to remember the no dating as a teacher rule for quite a while, and I'm like, Violet, because she's going around and telling other people about it. She's like, oh, this is why we can't date anymore. And I'm like, Violet, stop telling them. Nobody knows this rule except you. Shut your fucking mouth. A couple of other people who are not members of Violet's inner circle try to form a, like, adventuring party to go find Andy's people, but these guys all suck and are in charge of being wrong because they're not in Violet's inner circle. You'll find that pretty much anyone who isn't a personal special friend of Violet's is just wrong and awful, and that's, like, all the characteristics they get. Only people who are in Violet's specific team or are friends of hers that she's made in other books get to like have good points or be right or just about anything. Everyone else, and especially like older adults, stupid and wrong. The meeting, though, where the people are there to be wrong mostly exists because Violet and Xaden flirt aggressively and dirty talk with each other over their mental bond. There's so many scenes in this book that don't need to be there, and I'm sure I've already covered several scenes that don't need to be here, but this one definitely doesn't need to be here. We go back to even more of that like hand-to-hand combat. We love our hand-to-hand combat class, and this one only exists so that Xaden can be the teacher and he can kick everyone else's asses as a quote-unquote lesson, because I guess they have to learn how to lose or some shit, but like everybody who comes up against him, of course, he is like leaps and bounds better at everything than they are. The book mentions how you can learn to shield your mind from people trying to read it, and like Violet can shut Xaden out. She can close the bond. She can shut out Xaden if she concentrates, and vice versa. So I'm like, why are we so afraid of psychics in this world when apparently it's super easy to learn how to like close off your mind? Because I think Xaden is like, hey, because Dane, he's a touch telepath, and he's like, hey, did you remember to like close off your mind when you're around Dane? And she's like, yep. And I'm like, oh, good, glad we've solved that. So I really don't understand why psychics are so dangerous in this world when apparently you can just very easily learn to mentally block them out. Speaking of Dane, we remember him for a minute. Violet needs him to go get some of her father's research from Dane's father's office because Dane's father has Violet's mother's job. Now it doesn't matter. It only exists because Dane has to be like Violet's little toady now. Like that's how he's redeeming himself as a person, is that now he is like doing as she says and getting whatever she wants. That's basically his personality, is he is now one of Violet's minions, and it's okay if she tells him to go do things he doesn't want to do because he was a unlikable love triangle member in the first book. So she gets her father's research back, and there's a notebook that has like a puzzle to open it. It's like a combination lock on the notebook, because why not? Violet's ex shows up in person. Xaden gets unreasonably angry about it, like in front of their friends. Like if this guy looks at Violet, he's like trying to murder him. That's not sexy at all. That just demonstrates a lack of trust on Xaden's part. He doesn't trust Violet to not start going after her old fling. Like that's not, ooh, cute, he's so jealous. That's, he doesn't trust his girlfriend not to go hump some other guy. And I have more of Violet and Xaden dirty talking through their link, and I long for death. Also, Xaden's shadows can apparently hear. So, like, if you think that you're safe to have a private conversation, no, you're not, because any shadow in the corner could be one of Xaden's shadows, and the shadows can hear, and he can hear through the shadows. Violet and her friends went on another MacGuffin hunt. I don't even have written down what the MacGuffin is. It's that unimportant. There's just some MacGuffin hunts thrown into this. And also, we reiterate now at this point, again, how important it is to find Andy's people, but we've really been doing nothing to try to find Andy's people. Like, I legitimately thought that this book was going to be the journey to find Andy's people, mostly. Once I found out at the very beginning that we needed to find them, I was like, okay, well, this is going to be the book where they quest. Most of this book is not that, and I really think that it should have just focused in and been only that. Worry about some of this stuff in the next book. We have 5 books. It's fine. And these books are so long. It's fine. But the place that they go to find the MacGuffin, this latest MacGuffin, is to a place that doesn't have magic. We find out that a lot of places don't have magic in this world, and, like, their homeland is one of the few places that actually does have, like, inherent magic. And so, like, when they fly out of their homeland, they can't use their powers, even though they get their powers from their dragons. I don't know. It's unclear. They go into a null magic zone. Much of the earth is a null magic zone. And it would be really cool, because again, they have the Griffins with them. Why do they have the Griffins with them? They do nothing. But it would be really cool, because the Griffin riders are used to not being able to use magic, if they got to do something cool that the Dragon riders couldn't do, because the Dragon riders are used to always having magic all the time. But no, the Griffin riders are just here as well. Sometimes we remember them. Then we have an extremely contrived action scene that I'm, like, thinking back in, and I'm like, why? So they find the MacGuffin in this little town that's, like, abandoned, like this ghost town, I think. And then somebody lights it on fire, and the town is on fire, and somebody freaking dies. And Xaden can't put out the fire, even though previously his shadows could have totally done that. But this time they can't totally do that. They can use magic in this location. It's so confusing and so stupid and so contrived, and, like, cut this entire thing out. And I don't think we miss anything. Just have them either find the MacGuffin somewhere else, or already have the MacGuffin on them, or I don't even remember what the MacGuffin that they find here is. So did they actually even need it? Oh yes, Mira grabbed the MacGuffin off page. So they're checking out this town before they burn it down, and then somebody freaks out, starts a fire. We didn't start the fire. It's been burning since the world been turning. And action scene. And Violet's like, darn it, we didn't get the MacGuffin. And then Mira's like, I got it off page for you. And I'm like, wow. Now, you may remember in the previous book, in Iron Flame, that this author really liked to have Violet's dragon go away from her, and then Violet will be in danger, and the dragon will be flying back to help her, and the dragon will be, like, radioing in, essentially, through their bond, being like, I'm a mile away, I'm this far away, I'm, like, 2 minutes away, you know, and that does happen several times in this book as well. Not as much as the previous book, but the author has not gotten over her love of having this specific thing happen. They go to see the Collector. You remember him from book 2. He's an ally now, I guess. And we mention again, Violet specifically mentions how vulnerable this guy's house is. Like, his house is just completely undefended. And she's like, if anybody attacked, he'd be screwed. She mentioned that in the previous book too, and we didn't do anything with it. Spoilers, we don't do anything with it in this book either. Why do we keep mentioning that Violet notices that? Like it's a clue. And then never doing anything with it. Like, are we saving this for some kind of big reveal later that he's a bad guy? Because, yeah, he's pretty obviously not a good man. If it turned out that he was working with the Venom, I wouldn't even be a little bit surprised. So I don't know if this is a thing, or if this is just Yaros just wants to have Violet observe this fact for some reason. They go into another null magic zone, and all of the other dragons cannot communicate with their riders except Violet, who can communicate with her 2 dragons, I guess because she's special. I don't think that ever gets explained either. People, like, kind of brush it off, like, oh, maybe it's because you have 2 dragons, but, like, nobody really is all that concerned. It only exists because the author didn't want to cut Violet off from talking to her dragons in her own head. And of course, all of the other dragon riders are freaking out because they have, like, 0 practice not being able to communicate with their dragons. Even though they have a potion that does that, they did it, like, 1 time in the previous book. And it's like, or if so much of the world does not allow you to use magic, then I feel like we should be training this a lot more. Violet's ex has a really bad temper, and that's why we're not supposed to like him, except for we're also supposed to ignore all of the times that Xaden flies into a rage anytime another man, like, blinks in her direction. It's fine when Xaden does it. At one point they have to ride horses, but don't panic. The author hand waves that away by being like, yeah, the characters have a whole conversation about how all of them used to ride horses as children, so they're all really good at it. So, like, don't even worry about it. And I'm like, wow. Just like, you're just gonna throw in this retconny conversation about how all of them loved horseback riding as kids? When was Violet doing that? When was she was in the scribe quadrant for a lot of her time, and also being so disabled that she broke her leg, like, just for sneezing. But also she was in a relationship with a prince and riding horses all the time. And apparently she used to go riding with Dane. And Dane used to be, like, super hyper protective of her because of her disability. But no, I guess he was fine with her riding horses. The characters stop at a village and they go to a bookstore to try to find clues, but they can't even go to a bookstore without getting into a fight, so we have another physical fight scene, because these characters do not know how to get themselves out of any situations except for by fighting their way out. With the stupid fight out of the way, an old lady appears to be like, hey Violet, I have all of these papers that your father left behind for me to give to you, so that's really lucky. Apparently, in this place, they are an entire culture of atheists, because as you will soon discover, every other culture that we encounter in this book is, you know, have you heard of Planet of Hats? You know, especially like in Star Trek, although it happens in a lot of sci-fi. If you encounter an alien race, they'll have like one gimmick and that's all they do. Like the Klingons being a warrior race, and that's it. So here it's just planets of hats. Every time they go to a new place and learn about a new culture, these people have one thing that makes up their culture, and that's it. And these people, atheists. Also, the old lady who's here to hand off the book spends an inordinate amount of time talking about Violet's love life, because you will find that not only is Violet obsessed with her love life, but so is everybody else. We also have the horny old lady trope, because the old lady also, when she's not talking about how great Xaden and Violet are for each other, has to be thirsting after Xaden. Because it's funny when old women have libidos. Xaden is still obsessed with Violet's hair, just in case you were wondering. All she has to do is, like, move her hair over her shoulder, and he's, like, fully bricked up. Also, great news. Because they're in a null magic zone, these two can have all kinds of crazy, horny sex for an entire chapter. And I will say that the love scenes in this book, I want to say the sex word too many times or YouTube will hunt me down with snipers. The love scenes in this book are very bland. Like, boring, honestly. And I'm not just saying that as an asexual. I think I've heard other people saying that they are boring. They are so bland. I don't even know if Yaros is into them anymore.
So Reads with Rachel, who I don't think watches this channel anymore, but if you still do, hi Rachel. Anyway, Reads with Rachel did a breakdown of all of the sex scenes over all of the books and discovered that they are identical. It's just the same, down to the motions that they do, down to the words that they say, over and over and over again. So that's why it feels bland. I've read it several times before in the previous books and at the beginning of this book as well. All these books are supposed to be so hot and steamy, and this couple is just doing the same that they always do every time. Like, where's the hot and steamy, guys?
Also, in the first book, they had a brief moment where they could sense when their dragons were humping, and that makes me wonder if the dragons can also sense when they are humping. Don't worry, though. I think the author realized how, like, weird that was. Because that was weird. That was a weird thing to happen. So that hasn't come up since book one. Xaden was just like, learn to shield your mind from that. And Violet was like, will do. And that was the end of that nonsense. These characters like to say same to each other. So Violet will be like, I love you, Xaden. And he'll be like, same. Even though they don't have magic, they still break furniture with their smexy times. Violet, to her credit, does bring up the fact that Xaden could totally just live in a place like this until they figure out how to cure him of his vampirism, because here there's no magic, so he doesn't have to worry about, like, taking magic from the earth and becoming more evil. But oh no! Being here is actually really painful for the dragons, and Xaden would never do that to his dragon, so he can't stay here after all. Darn it, darn it, darn it, darn it. If only the author hadn't come up with a bullshit reason why that wouldn't work. Then Violet's ex went and got himself kidnapped, and Xaden and Violet have to go rescue him. Apparently, riding your dragon, even though you can't communicate, is like perfectly fine for everybody. There's no miscommunications, there's no issues, so that's great. Why did we cut everybody off from their dragons, like, in this section? Other than the fact that we didn't want them to have magic, except Violet, I guess. All of the books that Violet got from the old lady are password protected. Oh, by the way, she did figure out how to open that first notebook, and I think that's how she found out about the old lady and that bookstore that she had to go to. And of course, the password also pertained to her love life, because her father was obsessed with her love life, just like everyone else. Everyone is so invested in what Violet's love life is doing. So it didn't pertain to her father's life, to her father's beloved spouse, any other aspect of his children. No, specifically Violet's love life. But all of the new books that Violet got from the old lady are password protected as well, and I don't think she figures out any of the passwords in the space of this book. I think they're just being saved for later books. We have a lot of disdain for this society that is pacifist, because a non-violent society is wrong and bad. Like, this book is very clearly written by an American who very much worships the military, because there's a lot of still that undercurrent of, like, violence is the only way to solve problems, and any cultures that we meet who try not to solve their problems with violence are treated as, like, wrong and backwards, and also they tend to be very, like, snooty and treat our main characters poorly and be all like, well, you silly violent people. And it's like, this author cannot conceive of, like, pacifism as a choice that would be good. It has to just be like people who are too dumb to figure out that you need to shoot or punch something. Xaden tries to throw his weight around as a duke. It doesn't super work. Also, we hear him making rumbling noises about marriage. This is his first, like, inclination that he might want to marry Violet. And the entire side quest to rescue her ex-boyfriend feels so pointless. Like, again, this could be cut. We would miss nothing.
I can't even remember if I mentioned that one of the many side quests that they're on is to rescue her ex, who is the prince and has a bad temper, but that's another thing that they're doing, and as I said, it is pointless and could be cut from the book.
But of course, negotiations immediately devolve into violence because, as we've established, this author doesn't know how to resolve anything with, like, negotiations or thoughtfulness. You remember how Violet was supposed to be very, very clever in the earlier books. She was supposed to outthink her opponents rather than beating them up. In this book, they just beat them up. And it turns out that Xaden can pull power from certain items as well. So he doesn't just have to, like, suck power from the earth. Violet happens to have, like, an item with her that he can just draw power from, and that depletes the item, and then it can be, like, reinvigorated with more power. So, like, if he didn't have the thing where he turns evil from drinking more power that's not from dragons, then we could just totally do that. You just give him a couple of those, and when he needs to use his powers, he, like, drinks from those, and then he just keeps having them refilled. So they kill a bunch of people, and they win, and then that's it. We also have what I think is a queer character. One of the guys is bisexual. It's implied. And also we have, of course, the horny bisexual trope where he's just sleeping around like crazy. The straights are very monogamous, and the bisexuals are just out there sleeping with everybody. Liam's little sister finally reappears in the book, because I was like, oh, is she going to be an important character? Not really. Just the author remembers some of these characters every now and then and sprinkles them in. Like Violet's best friend Rhiannon is also barely in this book. But Liam's little sister is now part of, like, Violet's inner circle as well. Violet's inner circle is too big. It seems like Xaden's powers are evolving. It feels like he's able to, like, read her mind instead of just read her intentions. But that might be due to something else. We're probably going to have to wait until another book to find out. Violet notices it, but she just dismisses it every time. Once again, Violet and company have to disobey rules to go search the islands, this time for Andarna's people. It's just the same thing over and over again. Violet wants to do something. Somebody in authority tells her no. She says, fuck you, Mom, I'm doing it anyway. She goes and does it anyway and is never punished for it. There are zero consequences for disobedience at this point for Violet. It's like the book just knows she's a main character. Also, Violet and Xaden are never allowed to lose a fight. They can maybe get into a little bit of a scrape in the middle, but they always have to win. Always, always. And that just does not make for engaging characters. Engaging characters can lose sometimes. Engaging characters can fail and be wrong sometimes. These characters are never allowed to do that. They always have to be right, and they always have to win. So, like I said, there are two princes. There is the bad prince, who is Violet's ex, and then there is the good prince, who's the younger one, who has become a dragon rider, and he goes off on a secret mission, I guess. Violet casually wonders why dragons, like a species of dragon, would choose to live where there is no magic. Because obviously Andarna's people live out here where there's no magic. And then it never goes any further than that. She wonders it. That's it. We learn that Violet and her siblings have an estranged grandmother, and she's clearly going to be important in later books, but really not important in this one. The Griffins still suck, and I don't know why we keep including them, because the author will never let them do anything better or cooler than dragons. They go to visit another kingdom. We'll find out what this kingdom's hat is in a minute, but when they visit this kingdom has never seen dragons before, but they do have ballistas that are perfect for shooting dragons on top of their walls. By the way, this author calls ballistas crossbolts, presumably because she didn't want to bother looking up what a ballista is. But this is what they are. It's just that's how they're just these ballistas. So these people are basically the Klingons. They are a warrior culture.
Human females are so repulsive.
And to impress these people to get an audience, the main characters have to win in combat. Easy peasy. One of the main things that keeps me from liking this book more is the obvious contrivances that are just very much in your face. I know we've talked about it in the past, how being a writer isn't about not having contrivances. Everything in a book is contrived. The key is to make your reader feel like it's not. That's the magic trick. Good authors make contrivances feel natural. This author does not. I can see the seams. I can see all of the places where she bent and tweaked the world so it would suit her main characters so her main characters can win. It's not natural world building. It's not natural flow of events. It's just stuff so the main characters have things to do and that they can succeed at. For some reason, people here in the Warrior Land have silver hair. I kind of feel like, because some stuff about Violet's silver hair comes up in this book, I feel like the author got a lot of notes about Violet's special girl hair and like, what is the point of it? And she's like, oh, I should maybe make there be a point. So there's some people with silver hair here in the Warrior Land. Of course, Violet and Xaden are two of the people who have to fight, and Dane is another one. And all three of them go up against three champions from the Warrior people. And the person that Violet has to fight is ginormous. And we're supposed to believe that Violet is like quaking in her boots, but we are not afraid because Violet wins every single fight, especially in this book. Previous books as well, but in this book more than any other book, Violet never loses. And of course, yeah, she wins this fight, and pretty handily as well. Dane's the only one who gets his ass handed to him because fuck Dane. Dane is this book's whipping boy, and we're supposed to be fine with that because he was annoying in a previous book. There's a whole sequence, though, before they get fighting, of them arguing about who's going to be the champions in fight that doesn't need to be there because we all know it's going to be Violet and Xaden, and just Dane also thrown in. Like, why? We don't need to have everybody being like, I will fight as the champion. We know who it's going to be. Also, the fight, of course, includes daggers and also Violet doing one of those come here, like, fight gestures if you're not looking at the screen. You missed it. It's very cliche and does not need to be here. A storm starts while they're fighting, and it's implied that, like, maybe it's Andarna somehow, and then nothing ever seems to really come of that. But okay, the warrior people are like, we will only ally with you, because apparently one other thing that Violet and company are doing out here is looking for allies. And the warrior people are like, okay, we will only ally with you if you also give us dragons. And Violet's like, never! Because you are evil and wrong. We are the ones who should be allies with the dragons, not you, even though we are also hyper-violent. And the people are like, okay, then we won't be your allies, and that's the end of that. This entire island could have been an email.
Could you really not just put this in an email?
And then, after they visit the warrior people, they hop over to the island of the nerd people. The nerd people live in bland fantasy suburbs, and I don't understand why. Just like with the warrior people having to prove themselves in combat, here in the nerdy land, they have to prove themselves with intelligence, kind of. Xaden's mother is here for some reason. This whole sequence with Xaden's mother feels like just so, I keep saying contrived. I keep looking for a different word besides contrived, but it's so contrived because after this sequence, we don't think about her or talk about her ever again. But Zayn's mother is here and he hates her because apparently in their society, you can just like buy a woman you can rent a woman. So Xaden's father rented this woman to bear him an heir, and then she went back home. And Xaden resents her for having done that and the fact that now that she's back home, she has a different family. He does not seem to internalize ever at all what it must have been like for his mother to essentially have been purchased like an object and forced to bear the baby of someone she presumably didn't even like, and then chucked off home when she was finished with that. It's all about Xaden and how bad his mommy made him feel. Xaden has mommy issues, and even though he is a grown-ass man, he is a whole adult, he never once even approaches maybe being empathetic towards his mother, and Violet is 100% on board with him not being. She's like, oh, you're right, Xaden, your mom is an awful, awful person. And also, Violet had a really complicated relationship with her mother, but Violet doesn't bring that up. Feels like something that we could bring up. Seems like a parallel that we could have, but we're not gonna. So as part of the wisdom test, we of course have to talk about Violet and Xaden's love life. What else would we talk about? How else would we frame our wisdom test if not to talk about Violet and Xaden's love life, culminating in Xaden being like, I love Violet and I'm going to marry her no matter what. Like, Xaden is basically like, let's have a wedding tomorrow if that's what you want. Even though these people are like, it's unwise to marry a commoner. He's like, I shan't. I shall marry this common girl if I want to, mother. And then while they're eating, Violet figures out that their cake has been poisoned. And she stops everybody from eating it except for one character, Garrick, who eats a bunch of poison cake before Violet realizes it. Taryn, her dragon, does one of those I'm far away but flying to your rescue things. And Violet, like, sniffs the cake and she's like, if I can sniff the ingredient, I'll know what it is. Like, I'm going to the kitchen and I'll sniff it out. But also, conversely, it turns out that Violet also poisoned these people. Off page. We were not told. I don't understand why she poisoned them. She does not know, unless the author is lying to us. Violet doesn't know that these people are planning to poison her. She just preemptively poisons them. And I don't know why. So now everybody's poisoned. Violet has poisoned them. They have poisoned her people. She's running around harassing the kitchen staff and threatening them and being violent with them because they were doing their jobs. And of course, she finds the cure and then she blackmails the evil king with the antidote to the poison that she gave him. And in doing so, she proves that she's cleverer than the wisdom people. And so then I forget, like, do they decide to ally with her? I don't think so. I think she just proves that she's smarter than them by having poisoned them for no reason. But luckily they were also planning to poison her, so it's okay. And then they leave. And Xaden never thinks about his mother again. I will say that this book is not as bad as a book like, say, Sky Shade, as for coming up with random stuff that, like, just happens, of course it would. But that whole Violet poisoning them preemptively doesn't make any sense. And of course, luckily, Xaden never has to process his mommy issues or deal with the fact that his mom is a human and may have had a difficult life and had to make a very hard choice. He is just like, okay, bye, Mom, and flies off. And he never has to think about her again. The third island they go to does have a little bit of magic, and also this is the Trickster Island. Here on this island, they have to play a game to prove themselves to talk to the leadership. Every single one of these islands, they have to do something that pertains to the island's gimmick to be able to talk to the leadership. And here they have to play this game, and this game consists of picking cards at random, and whatever the picture is on the card, it goes along with some sort of consequence. And like one of the consequences is that one of their guys gets a cat. The cat is brought up one other time and never seen again, much to my disappointment. I thought the cat was going to be like a thing. No, never brought up again. I don't know what happened to the cat. Maybe it falls off a dragon and dies. But one guy gets a cat. And another person gets an arrow through the heart. Luckily, that was a Griffin rider who got the arrow through the heart, so we don't care. Nothing of value was lost.
Hard luck, Dave. Always knew you were a bit weak.
Violet gets really extremely angry that these people randomly killed one of her acquaintances, as though her culture, her own culture, doesn't heavily promote killing off anybody at random. Like, if we were back home at her murder school and one of her friends got killed, Violet wouldn't be like, the whole culture of my murder school is wrong. She would be like, no, that's a shame. I liked that guy. But it can't be helped because the murder school is wise. But also, because Violet keeps her freak out on the inside, these people decide that they will ally with her. These are the first people who will be allies with her. This doesn't matter. I don't think these allies ever come up again. But each of the islands that they've gone to seems to have picked a specific god to have their whole personality based off of. So like the violence people, they had a certain god. The wisdom people, they worship the wisdom god. These trickster people, they worship the trickster god. I don't know, though, still if the gods are real or not, or if people are just making this their whole personality for no reason. But also, because the author doesn't know what she's doing with this at this point, they go to have a funeral for the Griffin guy on like this separate little island, and Andarna's people just find them there. So we find Andarna's people through absolutely no effort, actually, of the main characters of this book. Andy's people are peace dragons. They are all feather tails. And they are the insufferable, smug brand of pacifists that we talked about before, how this author sees anyone who doesn't like fighting and doesn't see violence as the answer as just like super, super smug and super, super judgmental and super, super wrong. Because we're not supposed to like these dragons. Because they're like, how could you take our child, our baby? We sent a baby to you to see if maybe you had stopped being so violent, and you took our baby to war. Like, I feel like it's pretty understandable why these dragons would be upset. But we're not supposed to side with them. We're supposed to side with Violet, because Violet didn't know it was a baby at the time. So she took their baby to war by accident, so it's okay. And it's like, no! No! Because their whole point is that you're still using dragons in general for stupid human violence. But we are supposed to side with Violet and her people and be like, no, violence is good and right, and you people are just stuck up and stuffy and don't want your babies to go to war. Because Andarna loves war. She keeps talking about how she's like strong and a warrior, and don't her people love her for who she has become? And I'm like, wow, this messaging. Also, the dragons casually say that there's no cure for Xaden, because if you recall, not only were they looking for Andy's people to help power up the ward stones, but also for some reason we think that Andy's people would know about the venin, and it turns out they do, and they say, yeah, there's no cure. So we're 65% of the way through the book, and the mission to find Andarna's people is over. And it didn't even start until like 50% through the book. So like teeny tiny portion of the book is finding Andarna's people, which feels like it should be like the whole book. And all they did was hop from island to island where the people were like, here's our gimmick, participate in our gimmick. And then Violet and company did, and then we hopped to the next island. I wonder if some of the dragons here might not want to leave with the peace dragons. Like, does every single dragon here, are they happy to be weapons? Are they happy to be going to war and their people getting killed and their bonded humans getting killed? None of them would be like, hey, I might like to go live with you guys and be a peace dragon. So Violet gets home from the mission that she wasn't supposed to be on, and surprisingly, they just wag their finger at her, and she's not punished. Never punished, because it's Violet. She goes right back to class. Business as usual. We find out the baddie of the week is a mirror match for Violet, or at least we think she is, because not only is she a woman and she has silver hair, but she also has lightning powers. Also, the book has completely forgotten about the no dating a teacher plot. It existed for like a chapter or two so that Xaden and Violet couldn't hump nonstop, and is completely gone away at this point. We don't care about that anymore. And once again, I point out that Violet had to be a perfect dragon rider or die, but Sawyer and his leg get to take all the time in the world to convalesce and decide if he wants to get back to dragon riding. Some rando manifests shadow powers, and there's only supposed to be one shadow wielder at a time, which seems to imply that Xaden is undead, but we don't really address that. Xaden is just like, oh, the universe is righting itself because like there has to be one shadow wielder and one lightning wielder alive at the same time, or some bullshit like that. I don't know, it's stupid. But it's just so Xaden can have more angst. Also, again, we shit on Dane, and I say that his main crime in this book seems to be that he's a little bit autistic coded. And the more I thought about it, the more it was true. Dane, I don't think it's intentional. Dane is autistic coded. He's a little bit too rigid in following the rules. He has a very rigid sense of justice. He's a little bit oblivious. Like, you need to be very direct with him, and even then, maybe he doesn't get it sometimes. Like, and we hate him, by the way. He gets shat on all the time in this book. Brendan shows up to be like, by the way, I can't mend Xaden Like, Brennan is their magical healer now, and he's kind of the only one. And he's like, by BTW, I can't man Xaden anymore, because Xaden has apparently gone too far to the dark side, which doesn't actually mean anything. Like, he hand waves away the fact that they could, once again, resurrect Jack from the dead. And Jack is also a Venin. They can resurrect him from the dead because he wasn't as far gone as Xaden. But they can't, this guy cannot use his healing magic on Xaden. And also that doesn't matter, because we just won't injure Xaden anymore, ever in this book. Like, we can't magically heal him, so we will just not injure him. And he's never injured again for the rest of this book. The beginning of this book, it felt like we were going to have, like, family drama, and this was maybe going to be a little bit the family book about family, because we had Brennan and Mira early on having conflicts. And then they went away for a really long time, and now they're back just to snipe at each other again, and I'm like, this is so pointless. Why is this here? But Xaden stormed away in a huff, because he's a broody boy, but that lasts about 10 minutes before they get back together. Because one thing this book really likes to do is put obstacles in front of the main couple and then solve them immediately. Like, this author does not like delayed gratification. Readers want that. Readers want there to be conflict and things keeping the main couple apart for a little while instead of just going, oh, they can't date because they're a teacher and student, but they do anyway. Oh, Xaden goes away because he's so upset, but cut to him being back or her going to where he is immediately. Like, there's never any time in between. This author is so obsessed with these two as a couple that anything she throws at them as an obstacle to their couplehood is immediately solved. Xaden has a catchphrase. It is well the fuck aware, and I hate it. I pretty much hate everything about Xaden, but I especially hate his catchphrase. While Xaden was gone, he decided to be less emo all on his own, and he's like, actually, I want to keep trying, so yay, I guess. Then it turns out that Violet and Xaden are sharing dreams, and after some conversation, Xaden is like, oh, Violet, you probably manifested your second power finally, and it's that you're a dream walker, and you can walk in people's dreams. And it turns out that walking in people's dreams is like, not only is it super ultra rare, but it's also considered one of the forbidden types of magic. Like, psychics aren't allowed to live, and this is considered to be a type of psychic, even though Dane is a touch telepath. He's allowed to live. But because she's a dream walker, she could get privileged information from people's dreams. And I'm like, okay, what are these people dreaming about? Because all she would get from my dreams is the most wacky bullshit that has nothing to do with my life. Like, if she wandered around in my dreams, she would find zero important information. Luckily, another attack happens, so Violet and Xaden don't have to actually talk about this dream walking thing for very long or deal with that for very long at all. On to an action scene. Also, Violet really doesn't think about the fact that she's a dreamwalker anymore in this book. We just had to bring it up. But then somebody, I think it's the younger prince, tells Violet to defend a specific temple. And Violet's like, no, I'm not doing that because I've never obeyed an order in my life. And so she wanders off to do her own thing. Baddie of the Week is present because of course she is, and they've all been traveling in storms. The Venin have been moving around inside of storms. We figured this out a little while ago, and I don't know why people are not more afraid of storms now and more cautious about storms, but they keep being surprised when a storm happens and there are Venin hiding in the storm. And Darna decides to follow orders, and she goes to the temple, and so Violet has to go to the temple because Andarna is already there. So, like, we could have skipped a step and just had Violet be like, okay, I will defend this temple. But Violet never follows orders, and we have to know that about her. So she doesn't go until Andy's already there. And we have a whole thing where there's a priestess in this temple who sees Violet's hair and is like, oh, your hair, you have the special silver hair. And it turns out like the people in this temple dye their hair silver. So I don't know, are we setting up for Violet to be like a demigod or something? Really, this whole thing about her silver hair to do with this specific god in this specific temple is extremely confusing. And a lot of the reveals coming up at the very end of this book are just confusing. Like, if you ask me what was revealed at the end of this book, even with my notes, I probably can't tell you. Just a bunch of stuff is thrown at us, and I'm like, why? Then at the last second, a peace dragon shows up to power up the ward so that the bad guy has to leave, and the peace dragon is like, hey, Andarna, you should come with me. After all, like, you know, we talked to you before and you said no, well, let me talk to you again. And they have a very short conversation, and Andarna decides that yes, she is going to leave with the peace dragon. We all know that this is going to last about 10 seconds. Nobody is convinced that Andarna is not going to come back, but okay, she leaves with the peace dragon, and it turns out that iridescent dragons can totally bond or break bonds whenever they want. And that's how she could be like a second dragon for Violet, is because peace dragons, it doesn't matter if the person is bonded to someone else, they can also bond and they can break bonds. And so Andarna just breaks the bond and Violet is despondent for, again, 10 seconds. She goes into a depressive state off page. We time jump to the point where she comes out of her depressive state. And we're just told that she's been catatonic for days, but we don't have time to like deal with any of that emotional fallout because the author's not interested in that. The author's really, really afraid of delving into deep emotions in this book. Aside from lust and romantic love, the stuff with Xaden's mother could have delved into deep emotions. A lot of the stuff that Xaden and Violet are dealing with could delve into deep emotions. Andarna ripping their bond away could delve into deep emotions, but we don't. We skip over all of those emotional beats to get on with just like the action beats and the romance beats. Then I have the note, why is this book still going? It's so aimless. Just a series of events leading to ? I'm over 80% through and I have no idea what the plot of this book actually is. What is the point? We do learn that while Violet was apparently having a downward spiral, Xaden was being a good man, and he's the only person, like, his dukedom is the only place that's actually shielding civilians, is like helping civilians. Xaden is the only good person. We've forgotten Jack. It's like he doesn't exist. His final line from the previous book implied that Jack might be an important character in this book, but he is not. He's very much not. Why the fuck did we bring him back from the dead? Brennan and Mira are back to exposition dump at Violet. This again, it feels so contrived. It's like the author was like, oh, I want them to have this information and the book's almost over. I'm like a million pages in. I need to get this information across. So her siblings just show up and have a info dump conversation about this stuff that Violet needs to know, about how when she was young, their mom like almost committed her as a I don't know, a ward of this temple, and that's why her hair is maybe silver, except for her mom like changed her mind, or because it was her grandma's idea, and it's all, I'm not sure I understand it. It's very confusing. All right, had to go warm up my tea because I've mostly just been holding it instead of drinking it. Not very smart on my part. There's apparently like a prophecy, or some priest had kind of a prophecy. Like, there aren't really prophecies in this world, but some priest had a vision, and it might have been about Violet, but it actually seems like it's more about Xaden maybe. It's so confusing. For some reason, Violet is worried about wielding her magic without Andarna, and I don't know why, because her magic comes from Taryn, except for the dream walking thing. Apparently the evil lady has been hunting Violet, but she's been doing the laziest job in the world. Bodhi comes back up, Xaden's cousin, who I think turns out to be his brother. It is very confusing. Like, the end of this, there's just a whole bunch of weird information and retcons and twists being thrown at you at the end of this, and I legitimately had a really hard time keeping track of all of the stuff that we're supposed to know now, so that'll be fun when I go into the next book. We have the line, his smile instantly becomes a core memory.
But these are called core memories.
Violet has been having nightmares throughout this book, which I will give the book credit. We actually do see some of her nightmares instead of just being told she's having them. And she's been having nightmares about the sage, the guy that she fought at the end of book 1, I want to say. It turns out that it's not actually her nightmares, it's Xaden's nightmares, because he also doesn't like the sage. Because this book is actually secretly more about Xaden than it is about Violet. Violet feels a lot of times like an afterthought in her own book in this one. So the bad guy had to retreat, but oh no, now she's captured Mira because the plot needs to happen, and why not? Everybody's arguing about what to do and whether they should rescue Mira, and I'm like, once again, shouldn't this super violent dragon culture be like, nope, she's on her own? Because, like, if she got herself captured, that's a weakness. She shouldn't have done that. This only exists so that Violet and company can go against orders and go save the day. I will say that while there is much less just everybody falling over themselves to praise the main character in this book, there's still not none, and anytime that Violet might feel a little bit down on herself, somebody, especially her dragon, is there to tell her that she's the best thing ever. So we find the baddie of the week, and she apparently was actually after Jack or something. I don't know, Jack is brought back up, and then she slits Mira's throat. And Violet, of course, freaks out. And every time that somebody is dying in this book, Violet says, not Mira, not... Earlier, somebody almost died on a mountainside. And she was like, not so-and-so. Like, every time somebody almost dies, Violet's like, not this one. And I'm like, well, which one, Violet? You live in a hyper-violent dragon society. Luckily, her brother is, in fact, on the scene. So I am not even remotely worried that Mira is going to die. Also, this author does not like to kill off characters who have had as many lines as Mira has had. For contrived reasons, it's stupid. Brennan is not quite powerful enough to do it, but the character of Sloane apparently can, like, leech powers from other people into someone else, like a conduit, I think. And so she conduits someone else's powers. Zayden's probably, or no, Dane. Dane volunteers. Dane is the whipping boy. He can have his powers leeched. We don't give a fuck about him. She leeches his powers so that Brennan, in fact, can heal Mira, and everything's fine. Don't know why we needed that. Now that this plot cul-de-sac is over, they tell Violet to follow the plan. But what the fuck is the plan? Things didn't go to plan, so I think we're improvising now. Violet goes to have her mirror match with her identical baddie, but even that feels like really sort of truncated, because the villain has only existed to just be like, mwahaha, join me, Violet, a couple of times in this book. I think someone else mentioned that I saw, I think it was Unresolved Textual Tension, mentioned that, oh, this baddie could be cool. Could be a cool foil for Violet. But she's not. She's wasted. She's just evil and silver-haired, and we think she wields lightning, although it turns out that actually she wields storms. So she's not quite a mirror match for Violet. Taryn has to go run off and do something real quick, so of course the bad guy shows up then, so Taryn can't help Violet in her mirror match. We have one mention of Violet having a bow, only to say how it won't be useful in this fight. I feel like this author heard my critique of the fact that this society has not thought of using bows, and personally puts one into each book just to have them be useless, as a personal fuck you to me. The baddie, of course, takes a moment to be like, join me, because she's a cartoon character. I think we learn at some point that Bodhi can block other people's abilities, but that doesn't ever come up until now when we think about using it on the baddie, but it doesn't work on her. So we only bring up the ability being useful, even though it'd be super fucking useful, when it can't be used. So even though the Venom have been traveling consistently inside of storms, nobody figured out that this lady was a weather wielder. They just thought she was a regular lightning wielder, and they're just conveniently storms moving every place that these people needed to go. And of course, what's supposed to be a big emotional blow to Violet of being like, she's not like me, she's like my mom, falls completely flat because Violet thought about her mom a little bit at the beginning and then not. And there were no complex thoughts about her mom. It was just, mom sacrificed herself and therefore she is good now and I like her. And then at the very end of the book, I don't know what the author is doing, but she hard cuts to a couple of other characters' points of view that we do not need. And also, even though they are read, because I listened to the audiobook, they are read by different narrators, the character voice is exactly the same. So if you had Violet's narrator reading for the other character whose head we jump into, I would not be able to tell that it wasn't Violet. We watched that other character fight for a while, and then we cut back to Violet. I will say, again, one thing that I like about this book is it has actual dragonback fights. I don't think we have a single fight of people doing hand-to-hand combat while standing on a dragon's back like they're a platform from Smash Brothers. I am so thrilled that this author finally figured out that what we would actually like to see is people riding their dragons into battle, not jumping from dragon to dragon. Like, I actually kind of enjoyed some of the Dragon v. Dragon or Dragon v. Wyvern fights in this book. But also, the griffins remain useless. So we cut back to Violet fighting the baddie, she escapes, and then we snap back to someone else's POV, and it's jarring, and I don't know why the author's doing it. Is it because she had no idea what to do for the final battle, and so she just keeps cutting away so that she doesn't have to write it? And then something happens, and I'm not 100% sure, because the end of this book is legitimately confusing, and there's so many things flying at you at once, but we cut to Imogen, and it seems like, maybe I'm just reading this completely wrong, but it seems like Imogen is flying to save her girlfriend who was helping some civilians. They seem like girlfriends. Like, I don't think she ever calls the other girl her girlfriend, but it's like heavily implied. I think she's like, the person that I love most in the world is like trapped in that building. And so she goes in there and she finds her girlfriend just in time for the girlfriend to die in her arms. And my flowers were gasted. Because if I am correct, and this is indeed a queer couple, as it is very, very heavily implied to me to be, we had a gay POV just to bury our gays. That's this entire sequence, is one half of a lesbian couple dying. What? That feels like a giant middle finger from Yaros being forced to write queer characters. Now, I could be wrong. I could be interpreting this relationship wrong. Maybe these two girls are just really, really insanely close friends, but then it's giving, they were roommates. They were just besties. Because, like, it seemed very much like a love scenario. And for that, I say, fuck you, Rebecca Yaros. You know what? A hearty and with my entire chest, fuck you for that. And then we continue. Oh, and also the death scene is just drawn out. It is so drawn out. Yeah, I just can't, I have what the fuck. We are still using daggers to kill Venin. Even though we're doing dragonback fights, we're still using daggers to kill these guys. We go back with Violet, now that we got the pesky gay out of the way. Violet and Tarn get caught in a giant dragon net that came from somewhere. A net appears out of nowhere and captures them. What fired it? Where did it come from? No fucking clue. I don't think the author thought about that. At some point, Violet was handed a mystery MacGuffin, which she has ignored until now. It's just been in her pocket. And it like digs into her leg as she's flailing around in the net. So she pulls it out, and it turns out that the mystery MacGuffin is a ceremonial dagger from the one goddess Dune that Violet might have been like committed to or is possibly a daughter of. I don't know. But she's got a ceremonial dagger, and this is an important plot point. That was a random MacGuffin that some character, I don't even remember who, just offhandedly gave to her at some point. This is almost as bad as Grimm getting the sword back off page in Skyshade. The Onyx Storm of the title turns out to just refer to what Violet thinks of Xaden's big shadow magic. So Xaden does a big shadow magic, and it's an Onyx Storm. And as far as I know, that is the only mention of Onyx Storm in this entire book, and I hate that. We couldn't think of anything else in this book. The hunt for the iridescent. I'm sure I'll think of more. I'm sure you can think of more. Please comment below and let me know what the title of this book could be. Besides Onyx Storm, the Onyx Storm is Xaden's shadow powers that comes up at the very end of the book. But of course, Xaden's shadow powers do come roiling to Violet's aid because she is in danger, and Xaden will always save her no matter what, even if it means he has to use more of his evil venom powers, and even if she was mostly fine and pretty much had the scenario handled on her own. And in fact, Violet uses her brand new MacGuffin dagger to kill this lady. It matters that she uses a ceremonial dagger for this one because some tie into the god we don't care about, whatever, but thank goodness she had it, so. The guy who handed it to her apparently turns out to be a precog, because originality is dead, and also there are just so many people with like semi-psychic abilities coming out of the woodwork. But just like the end of previous books, we cut to Xaden's POV now. Honestly, it was not needed. But here he is. We get to watch him succumb and use his powers to help Violet. And then we get a bunch of reveals in this scene that just confuse me. Someone else said, I didn't even get that from this scene, but someone else said that Bodhi turns out to also be a Venin. Because there's hints in the book that like there must be a spy in our midst, even though that really doesn't come up very often. But people are like, there must be a spy. And I think it's Bodhi, which is Xaden's cousin brother. Turns out to be a Venin, I think. I didn't even get that from the end of the book. Someone else got that from the end of the book. And, you know, good for them. If that's true, I'll believe them. Xaden's cousin brother, Bodhi, who looks a lot like him. In the previous two books, we mentioned how Xaden and Bodhi are almost identical. In this one, that is not brought up. And oh no, Xaden had to use his big powers, so now he's even more evil. He has succumbed. He's gone full vampire. Also, Andy came back. It doesn't really matter. I'm sure she helped in the battle a little bit. And then we find out that some dragon eggs are missing at the end of the battle. Just like the ending is flying at us at 1,000 miles an hour. This whole book dragged on and on and on. And this ending is just like bam, 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 bam. Here's a bunch of things. So dragon eggs are missing, I guess. And then Violet, in an ending that came, I was not So I was not expecting this very, very end. All of these books, of course, end on a very corny cliffhanger. That's what they do. We expect this. If I had a nickel for every time one of these popcorn pop culture books has ended with a girlie finding out that she's been married against her knowledge, I would have 2 nickels, but it's weird that it happened twice. Because Violet, goes unconscious, and when she wakes up, she finds Xaden's ring on her finger and, a marriage certificate with her that says she is legally married to Xaden now. So we basically have the ending of, what was it, the middle book? Nightbane. We basically have the ending of Nightbane is the ending of this book. Are these women exchanging notes? I'm starting to think that at least Yaros and Alex Astor are friends. Are they friends? I don't follow these authors. Are they friends? Are they just fully sharing notes? That's it. Then she wakes up, she finds out that she's married to Xaden, and that's the end of the fucking book. So, yeah, I have been talking for 2 hours, and I am very worried. Yeah, pretty much exactly 2 hours. I'm very worried that my computer's going to eat my audio at any second. It's going to be nope, you can't have that audio. I am going to leave you here. I'm also starting to lose my voice, but I will probably have more thoughts about this book, so I might make a second video about it. I might not. Depends on how I feel. But that was Onyx Storm. Oh, by the way, also, I did not expect to be doing this soon, because when I went to reserve this book on Libby, it was you have a couple of months wait. And I was that tracks. So I was that's fine. I'll be late. I'm always late. My review will be out after everyone else's like usual. And then 2 days later, it was available for me to borrow. So a bunch of people either changed their minds or put this one on the back burner, because you can do that in Libby. You can have a reserve stalled or whatever you want to call it. So a bunch of people decided that they didn't want to read this one right now, and instead they forced me to read it right now. Overall, too long, too convoluted. There were moments that were okay. I actually liked the dragon fights and the very, very small snippets we saw of Violet hanging out with her friends when they were not thinking about Xaden. I don't know if this book passed the Bechdel test. I think it technically does, just because there's so much of it that 2 women have to talk about something besides Xaden at some point in it. But there's a lot of people talking about Xaden and Violet and Xaden's love life. The people in this book, in this world, are just overly consumed with the love life of these 2 crazy kids. Don't forget that I have books that you can purchase available now on Amazon if you would like a fantasy book of a more manageable size, and also one that is hopefully paced just a smidge better. I hope. I do have a fantasy romance if you like the romance. However, it is fade to black, so if you're here for the smutty smut, I am not the author for you. Also, I have a Patreon and channel membership, so if you'd like to see videos not seen here on the regular channel, you can check those out. I often read excerpts of upcoming books, or there's an author interview that I have commentated on, stuff like that. So check that out if you're interested in some extra content from me. And otherwise, I am going to go do some cleaning, I think. I'm going to do some chores around here. Just anything to take my mind off of this awful, awful book. But honestly, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. It was not as bad as it could have been. It was still way too long. But after reading Powerless and Skyshade, this wasn't that bad. Yeah, I know. I'm shocked as well. Anyway, I'll see all of you again next time with whatever it is I happen to be doing next time. Bye!
Happy New Year.
This month, it's just the warmest of hugs from me to my lovely patrons. Patrons in reverse order, like Lisa, Amanda, Jenny, Savvy, Scribbling Cat, Rennie, Jesper, Zaire, Shelby, Vampire Antihero, Callison, Anne Sophie, Patrick, Belle, Light Julie, Hidden Glade, Kit, Merween, Sophia, Swamp Goblin Waifu, Deborah, Alyssa, Celia, Mufflier, KJ, Jessica, Caitlin, Robin, Jojo Bookish, Ronnie, Kirsten, Pudamancer, Mooney, Kira, Sam, Haley, Pansing Pony, Roma, 78 kilograms of shade, Kat, Sarah, Bird Anonymous, July, Martha Baggins, SB Boots, Laknanga, Tina, Gay Tutter, Jen, Annika, Kay, Scout, GK, Semi-Dark, Marshy, AJ, Lunar Muse, Jose, Lady Kragan, Cameron, Christina, Ria, Stephanie, Haley, Tactical Hot Dog, Nemo, and Bunny. Thanks again, everyone, for making it through another year with yours truly. Hopefully there'll be all kinds of cool stuff coming up soon.
It's so dumb.
It's
so dumb it's brilliant.
No! It's just dumb.